a panel entitled Foodtech and Alternative Foods, the biggest opportunity of the century. We have for you 3 speakers today. We have Anne-Valerie Bach, who's a partner at Cap Agro. We have Rodrigo Mayo Leiva, a program director at SOSV. We have Susana Voces, Global VP of Deliveroo. And today our moderator will be Carmen Alfonso Rico, who is a partner at Samaipata Venture Capital.
How are we starting? Good morning, everybody. My name is Carmen. I am a partner at Samaipata VC. We're a pre-Series A fund investing in marketplaces and platforms from our office in London, in Madrid, and in Paris. I head our UK investments from London. And I'm thrilled to be here today in Best Company to talk about one big passion of us as a fund and me personally, which is food. So let's discuss the future of food with no further delay. Let our panelists here introduce themselves to give you a bit of context, and then we'll get into it.
So I'm Anne-Valérie. I'm a managing partner with Cap Agro. Cap Agro is a European fund that is based out of Paris, but we invest throughout Europe, US, Brazil, and Israel. We focus on food and agri-tech, so anything from the farm to the fork. We have made 17 investments so far, and we do A and B rounds. Before that, I just joined 4 months ago, but before that, I was doing data and artificial intelligence for Serena Capital, another fund in Paris.
Cool.
So I'm Rodrigo. I'm currently a partner and program director at SSV. SSV is a $650 million venture capital fund, and we invest in the early stages of highly technical companies across the world. I'm based in London, and I lead the life sciences investment team, where we have over 70 portfolio companies. And within life sciences, probably 30% of our portfolio is food and agri-tech. So I guess that's why I'm here.
My name is Susana Voces. I'm working in Deliveroo in London. I'm the global VP of restaurants. Deliveroo is we want to be the food definitive company. I hope many of you know us, and I know we are here sponsoring some of the food in the event. And my experience, I have been working always in tech in different sectors. First in mobile, in Ericsson, then in PayPal. I was one of the first employees here in Spain, then in eBay, and now in Deliveroo.
So it's actually great to have very, very early seed investor, pre-seed even, Series A, B investor, and an operator to get the perspective of it. Basically, the beauty of food is that every human being needs it several times a day. That makes it a huge market, but it also poses huge challenges. And we were discussing before about what we thought would be most interesting to bring in. Basically, there are more and more people, but the resources are scarce, so we really need to find ways of feeding people more efficiently and in a more sustainable way to the environment. At the same time, consumer habits are changing, and people are demanding more healthy options, more personalized options. So the aim of today is to try to discuss what role does tech play into all this? How does tech help us address those challenges, and what is the latest that we've seen? So why don't we start with like a very hot topic, which is alternative foods, and more specifically, the future of meat. So I know you know quite a bit about it.
So we are probably the most active investors in what's called cellular agriculture, or the meat or proteins that you grow in labs. And we agree that that's a huge challenge, and that's why we are so active in this space. We see a lot of these companies, and even if the opportunity looks great and the science behind these products is amazing, it's going to be really a big challenge to turn that in from what we see as a prototype into a kind of mainstream product. And that's something that we're seeing. It's a huge challenge, even if the product itself is, 100 times better than the current alternative. When you grow meat in the lab, for example, there's no antibiotics, the environmental impact is way less, and it's basically the same thing. We are not talking here about the alternative, but exactly the same composition as meat. But we are seeing that taking that into scale, it's really challenging for this company. So we are trying to address or understand for our portfolio companies what's the kind of consumer sector that would really be the first adopters of this to try to create the best and market entry strategy.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point because actually, regardless of people being more and more conscious of the impact of producing food into the environment, or producing meat, sorry, into the environment, the truth is meat consumption is growing, right? And even in developed worlds. So we say one thing, but then we do another. And it is very clear that in order for this kind of alternative meat to work, you need to do a product that's even the same or as good as meat or actually better. And then that takes a lot of time and money as well from an investor perspective.
Yeah.
So yeah.
A lot of money. But I think it would be really interesting to see what the consumers are looking for right now. And I guess you have a lot of data when it comes to searches, for example, right?
Yeah, no, I think what we find out is when we ask consumers why they don't order online, the second reason why not ordering online today is because they don't find healthy options. So one of the first reasons is money, price. Second is healthy options. And third is because I prefer to cook at home. But we see the healthy options becoming like a top priority. And we look into how many restaurants are becoming with the healthy tag. And we see like a lot of restaurants are becoming like healthy food. Like give an example, in Dubai, one of the third orders, they're healthy orders. We call it healthy orders. And we have increased the number of vegan restaurants, for example, like 168% in the last year. So there is a lot of trends that consumers are demanding. And for us, what is important is to first like being able to be very clear of the ingredients, the calories, the HRE in the platform, and being able to search, and then selection. But clearly, it's a trend that is becoming super, super important for us.
Yeah. And so I'm a heavy user of Deliveroo in London, and it is true that.
Do you find healthy food?
No, yeah, a lot of it. No, in London the option is very large, but it is true that now there's like all these allergens and like all the ingredients, and it's very, very.
It's
clear.
becoming critical. I mean, consumers are asking for that, and it's difficult because you need to put all the information and make it very visible and easy to find. But we see that even we do promotions of healthy food and becomes super popular.
And do you see, or do you notice that consumers are willing to pay more for healthy food?
Well, I don't have that data. What I can say that two of the variables that we look is service and price. Yeah. So I think they want to have healthy food at every price. That will be the solution, no? Because I think people, and as you say, people need to eat 3 times a day, no? Like, so we need to bring, no, like all the kind of food at any time and everywhere, no?
That's right. You also, we were discussing, you had some cool insights on data for customers, which is another very big trend in empowering kind of the development of food tech data.
Yes, I guess we are gathering a lot of data, but this is not the most challenging part of it. The most challenging part is to make actionable insights of it. And you have the data, what do you do with it? So you have analytical companies that are able to predict trends on ingredients, on what kind of food is trendy and things like that, so that's quite useful. But you also have examples of people who are making this data available for consumers. And I wanted to highlight a company in France called Yuka. Yuka is an app that you have now in Spain as well, but 20% of the French population, so wow. I say it again, 20% of the French population is using Yuka to see whether the products they buy are healthy or not. So this is just massive, and it has changed a lot.
I'm sorry, I'm there fundraising or they're...
No, I'm not an investor.
They're bootstrapped.
Okay.
They are bootstrapped.
Sounds
they don't
like
have
a great
investors.
Company, to be honest.
They don't even have a business model because what they claim at the very beginning is they just wanted to make this data available for the public. But now they have a business model because brands and brands are using Yucca to make and change their recipes. So Intermarché has just announced 2 weeks ago that they are going to change the recipe of 900 of their products so that they can be Yucca compliant.
Wow.
And they say it that way.
Yucca compliant.
They are just not saying we are changing our recipes to be more healthy. They are saying we are changing our recipes to be Yucca compliant, which means that lines are moving. And if the trends are massive on the consumer side, the whole value chain is impacted and can change, which is a very good news, I guess.
It's another great example of something that tech is empowering in any sector, which is the shift in brands imposing it to customers. Right now, it's customers actually kind of driving the direction that brands take and their products, which is empowered by all that data.
Yeah, that's because they had an actionable data at their hand. So you just take a picture of the barcode, and it tells you whether the product is healthy or not, and then you can dig it into it and really see which ingredients are not healthy and and why the score is the way it is.
Super interesting. And we're talking about like data empowering customer choices in the food they want, but it's also about customers also want to know where the food they're eating comes from. So there's a lot of traceability. Obviously, we cannot have a panel without mentioning blockchain, but there are other ways to trace that is not blockchain, and it's a very big role of data in food tech. So Rodrigo.
Yeah, so shameless plug. We're investors in a company in New York called Carver, for example, and what they're doing is they're re-engineering microbes to trace food across the supply chain. So basically what they do is they can spray with a basic liquid lettuce, let's say, at the harvesting point, and they can track that exactly through the supply chain, just taking samples and doing sequencing on those microbes. And that's absolutely safe and very, very scalable and very cheap. And we're seeing amazing traction for potential customers, large corporations there, because the problem of traceability, it's not only about knowing where the food comes from, but what happens during that. And we had with this company, they actually started it because they had the founders, they had another company that were doing some kind of packaged goods product, and they saw what people would do in different ports across the world when they're bringing in the ingredients just to make sure that it gets approved, and that was using completely unapproved pesticides or anything, and it was horrible. So what they're trying to do is not only trace where it comes from, but what happens across the supply chain.
If I may?
Yeah, of course.
Traceability is a really big topic because once you have a product that is not processed, like salad or milk or whatever, you can really trace it all the way along. But as soon as the ingredient is processed within something, it makes really the whole thing really hard, and you have to have all the stakeholders being aligned and on what they want to do with this traceability. So you can imagine it's a very difficult topic to really embrace when food is processed.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I don't know if anybody has read it, but the New York Times published an article recently. One of their journalists basically got into a farm, in the US farm, a pig farm, and they stole a pig. And then they had it tested, and it was absolutely scary. Like the pig had pneumonia and I don't know how many other things, and was like just antibiotics all through him. So I think all this traceability is something that getting more and more conscious about. We also have a startup that it's a B2B fish marketplace, and one of the key value proposition is that it can track the kind of journey the fish does from the sea to your dish. And so talking about data also though, what about consumers not only demanding healthier choices, but demanding more personalized choices?
Yeah, I think data also in delivery is used a lot for the restaurants to help them to sell more. So give you examples, and it's just not data, it's more about tools, Like we know what consumers search, buy, order, and like in many countries. So we can get that data and give to the restaurants in a way that is actionable. So they just don't want, some of them, especially the medium or small companies, they don't want to gather all of data because they don't know what to do with that. So it's how you make that data actionable for them. And could be just operational data. Like we can say, look, if you open half an hour earlier, you will increase sales by that percentage. Because we believe that we know that in that area, people start ordering, for example, breakfast earlier in the morning. So that's one piece of data that they can use and do something else. Also, another data that they are very eager to get is consumer data, customer insights. What the consumers want, when, what kind of offers, what kind of menu. So we can translate, to give you an example, we can translate, for example, what consumers want and help them to create new menus, new virtual brands. We call it virtual brands. We say, look, you, for example, you sell sushi, but we know that with these ingredients, you can also build poke, and poke is super popular in your area. There is huge demand. So if you include this and this and this in your menu, you could be selling more. So there is operational data, consumer insights, and menu data that we can share with the restaurants, and we can help them to really understand what the consumer wants. And I think, as you say, now with the consumer, with the technology, the consumer has the power not to decide if they want to buy, if they want to eat, and in the restaurant, order. So they have the power. So we need to help the ecosystem, the restaurant especially, to understand what the consumer wants. And this is, especially not data, but tools and insights to make that efficiency.
And we've been speaking a lot about personalization and healthy food options, but it's obviously kind of a skewed perspective. It's like Paris, London, Madrid. It's a bit of a first world problem. But also the reality is that we need to figure out a way to feed like a growing world population with very scarce resources. So going back to a little bit like the alternative foods and the protein generation, how do you think all these lab-grown foods can help us address that challenge?
Well, I think it's maybe the most interesting area that we have to address nowadays, because yes, we foresee that we can grow meat in a much more profitable and sustainable way, with a lot of value on nutrition. Maybe more than what we have now with cows and other poultries or whatever. So the technology is here. It has to grow to scale, of course, but if you see in 10 years or 15 years' time, it will have a massive impact on consumption, of course, but also land, because there will be less cows. So there are plenty of other industries and fields that will be impacted by those new trends. And I think it's really a massive one, because you won't be able to tell whether the food comes from a lab or from a cow. And with all the really progress of computational science, and it's really a very promising field.
And going further than just meat, also, and looking at like agriculture in general and how to again make that more efficient and more sustainable, there's a lot around microbiome and how to play with that. What do you think?
Yeah. So before we go into that, something regarding what Anne-Marie just mentioned here. We were the first investors in Perfect Day, for example, Perfect Day Foods. It's the first company in the world that is doing milk without cows. So basically they are re-engineering yeast to express milk proteins. So basically it's just milk. It's not an alternative to milk. It's literally milk. And they have now released their first prototype with an ice cream. And something that was really interesting here is like they sold out in 3 hours, the first batch. And it was $100 for 3 pints of ice cream. So this tastes like ice cream. It's exactly like ice cream. It's just there's no cow. and consumers were willing to pay $100 for 3 pints. Again, this is California, so it may be like a bit,
That's very LA SF.
But yes, exactly. But what we're seeing here is like it's not just the kind of scientific discovery here. It's like consumers are not only willing to consume it, but also to pay a premium for it, because obviously the way that they are generating this milk has a way less impact in the environment, and most importantly, there's no antibiotics in it.
And ideally, that kind of fits through, and then it is just a more efficient way to feed like a very large population who can actually
exactly.
not pay that premium.
This ice cream test that they did, it was mostly to test how the consumers will react to it, but they are not focusing on doing a direct-to-consumer brand. They're working with big companies just to providing the proteins, and we think that's the best first step for this type of companies. And going back to the microbiome, yeah, there's a lot of discoveries, scientific discoveries when it comes to microbiome, and we are seeing that probably the best application of the technology is within biofertilizers and bioinol, and we have a company in Mexico that was able to create a specific recipe for a biofertilizer that is basically curing the agave, which is the plant where you make tequila from, cancer. So you're basically curing disease just by targeting the microbiome of the plant. So we are not only seeing it as a great way to improve efficiency, but also to get rid of all the pesticides and fertilizers.
Yeah. Super interesting. Cool. And then maybe continuing on the sustainability theme, but and back to consumers. What about, and how are you thinking about restaurants kind of working with waste management and like plastic free, because it's also a very big trend around food?
I think that they need, they're willing to have help from us and advice and support. So we partner globally with some suppliers, and we help the restaurants to start selling online, delivering. No? So they don't have, in many cases, the knowledge, the suppliers, or the way of doing it. And we are partnering and creating our shop to advise them and making sure they are aware of it. I think there is a conscience on the restaurant that they need to do it in a good way, and our goal is to partner with suppliers that do it in a better way. But I think it's still there is for them. No, when you talk to many restaurants, they are okay. The delivery sector is growing, could represent 30% of my sales, but how I do it? And one of the questions is like how I package this, how I send it. Is this friendly with the environment? So there is a lot of things that needs to happen there, and I think our role there is to help them to make sure we do it in the right way.
Cool. Have you guys seen anything around waste management that is interesting?
Yes, but I don't want to keep on plugging my own companies. But yes, yes, we really think that's not only a a huge problem, but it's a great investment opportunity as well. We've been investing in companies in that sector for a while. We're the first investors in BioSelection, company based in the Bay Area that is basically upcycling, plastic recycling in a completely different way. And we are also investors in Alginate, which is a company that is developing basically garments or potentially textiles out of algae. And we are seeing a lot of interesting advancements there. Again, it's in our case, what works at the kind of lab stage doesn't mean it's going to kind of work at scale. But with these two applications, we've seen amazing results at the large scale production.
The waste management issue is interesting because we tend to think about restaurants and like the food that goes to waste, and supermarkets and the food that goes to waste. But I was speaking to a company the other day, and basically in the UK, at least 1/3 of the food that is produced doesn't get sold, even because of all the like kind of cooperative issues and because they have quotas. And so basically they're perfectly good. They're not even odd or anything, and they go thrown away. And there are now people trying to kind of create an alternative market for that to be sold. There's a consumer company called My Odd Box, which basically sends you like a lot of vegetables every week for like a super cheap price. And it's just like vegetables are perfectly fine, but that were rejected because they were not perfect. But if you really look at the data, it's absolutely like horrific, the amount of food that gets wasted. So
yeah, there is a lot of local initiatives on wasting. So either they just sell the products the way they are, or they recycle them and cook them and sell them cooked. But those are really very local initiatives, so they are very hard to grow on a larger scale. So this is very micro-local initiatives that are difficult to scale.
Cool. So we have a few minutes left. So let's do a wrap up on everything that we've discussed, but let's do a little bit of a fire chat. Basically, the thing that excites you most about food tech, where do you see the biggest opportunity? And feel free to name a company if it's yours.
So maybe I will not emphasize on the topic, but I think what is really critical is that there is a lot of innovation within the startups or within labs and things, but those initiatives are hard to bring to the market. And what we would like to emphasize at Capagro is really helping those innovations go through corporates to hit the market faster. So we have 13 corporates as LPs, and what our aim is, of course, making money as a VC, but it's also helping to accelerate the go-to-market of those innovations. And because they might be really capital intensive as well, because producing microalgae or producing clean meat is very costs a lot. So you really have to bring partners in the loop so that it can really happen and hit the market. So for me, the challenge is much more not about having a lot of initiatives, it's much more having those initiatives scale.
Yeah, for me, it's pretty similar. I think there are three things that are key in our industry that are kind of getting into the way of food now, and it's the fact that next generation sequencing costs are going down, lab automation, again, costs are going down, and the possibility of managing the vast amount of data that living organisms have through machine learning is going to be great for us to find a way to produce proteins with cellular agriculture at affordable and efficient ways.
For us, I mean, focusing in the consumer and now the technology that is that they can choose where to eat and how to eat. It's more about how we make this, when they think about food, no, and through the data and the technology, we can support the restaurants and the producers to fulfill their needs.
Cool. So all in all, basically, we've discussed in depth how actually customers are flipping the supply chain and they're actually deciding or like determining the offering, how that is very much driven to healthy options. And now a very interesting challenge, which is the fact that we need to find alternatives, but they're still very early stage, and therefore we're not sure about how they can get to the consumer. I'll just add one point on that, and is that as VCs, and we have we are like privileged to have a lot of money to invest and make a big change into what can actually become a reality and what cannot. And therefore, we have a responsibility on the projects we choose. And in that sense, Foodtech is an amazing space to invest in businesses that can potentially become huge and very profitable, but that can actually have a positive impact in that. And we need bold people who are able to or willing to invest in things where there's no clear route to market, but it's just driving innovation. So thank you very much for sharing with us all your insights.
Thank you, everyone.